Well, Joseph, last time we spoke, we were doing quite well in the T20 World Cup, but once again fell victim to a spinner in the subcontinent. We make them all look like Jim Laker, don't we?
Yeah, it's true. They all look like we got Murley at one end and Shane Warne at the other. Funny though, New Zealanders have never really played spin well. They don't seem to read the ball well, and they don't have good enough footwork. It's interesting. A couple of guys, Kane Williamson, I think, bats sensibly and plays his way through it, but most of them seem to panic after about 2 overs and think they've got to do something extraordinary.
And it sounds like the West Indies are setting us up for more. They've got a couple of spinners. The tracks are friendly. Who'd have thought a few years ago that was their main attacking threat?
Yeah, well, after New Zealand's last tour of the West Indies, when Narayan went through us, I'm not surprised they put 2 or 3 in a team this time. It seems like a sensible option whenever you're playing New Zealand.
I don't know what the solution to that is. Simply our wickets aren't going to help us develop mass numbers of spinners. In fact, we're struggling to get 1 or 2. So how do we ever get over this? Do we have to have subcontinent tours every year for the B team back?
Yeah, but more experience on the subcontinent will be good. But the big thing is technique, really. I mean, our batsmen, they don't understand how to go down the wicket and when to go down the wicket, and their technique, bat behind pad or bat in front of pad, is deficient. So to me, it's a technical thing rather than our pitches.
So how do you see us faring against the West Indies in this tour? If we've got to get through this obstacle first.
Overall, you'd think we're a pretty strong team at the moment. I think we've got a very good pace attack, good solid batting right through, and we bat quite deep. Maybe we're a bit short of spin, but you'd think we'd be a better team overall.
And look at the IPL at the moment. It's been a bit of a wake-up call for Corey Anderson. A lot of pressure on the poor guy. He was expected to sort of fire straight up, had that injury. It was always going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit much, really. I mean, at one time there he went in with about 11 balls to go and made 4 off 1 ball and then was out, and they said, Anderson fails. And it's like, you're going in with 2 overs to go. You're going to have a bash at it. You could easily get out, and they know that. They've got 5 more wickets remaining. So I think there's been too much emphasis on him. It's because of that brilliant summer he had, especially that innings in Queenstown. And I think he's done not too bad. He's just a young guy coming through who happens to have played 1 superb innings early in his career, so he's got a big spotlight on him.
But Brendan McCullum's performing and keeping his team very much in the hunt.
Yeah, if you think what McCullum's done over the last year, 9 months or a year, he's becoming one of our really, really all-time great cricketers. And maybe he's finally being acknowledged that way. There did seem to be a thing with McCullum that people would raise their eyebrows and shake their heads, and there was always some problem with him in people's minds. I think that's evaporating, and that he's being acknowledged for how good he really is now.
Quite often see that in the media, though. There's for some reason the public latch on to, or the media perhaps incite it, on who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, and often they get that wrong both ways.
Oh yeah, well you'd know this too, Tom. I mean, when you see some of these stars of sport up close, they're nothing like they're portrayed by the media, nothing like it at all. I mean, that's just a PR image, and I know for sure I wouldn't want my kids growing up to be like some of the stars that people admire a lot, and conversely, some of the ones that people think are a bit quiet or even a bit sour are actually terrific people when you get to know them.
Think of a couple of sort of well thought of guys, Hansi Cronje and Azharuddin, who fell by the wayside rather rapidly, didn't they?
Yes, well, actually, speaking of them, we've got our own well thought of guy who's falling by the wayside quickly at the moment.
Well, Lou Vincent he's the whistleblower here, isn't he? He's got a lot of centre of international attention, and we've got to sort of sit and listen to what he has to say, don't we?
It's astounding what he's saying. I mean, he's really talking about match fixing in England, South Africa, New Zealand, India. I mean, it's astounding. And you think if little old Lou Vincent from New Zealand is involved in this, he's not the only one. So to me, it's very eye-opening, and it sort of tells me that this problem is way bigger than anyone had really acknowledged.
And we're not lily white either. We just sit here and think, New Zealanders wouldn't do that. But we're tarnished in some, we don't know to what degree, but in some degree we're all touched.
We're totally tarnished, and we're definitely not lily white. The only thing is the New Zealand cricket team has been so poor for several years that the thought of anyone paying anyone in the New Zealand cricket team to lose a match would be ridiculous, because they could do it without payment. But we're definitely not lily white, and this is one example, but I have a feeling before it's finished there'll be reverberations elsewhere.
It would be good to clean it up, though, and I think someone coming and pointing the finger and getting some... Because there's always been rumour and innuendo, isn't it, without anyone's giving us facts, but he seems to be prepared to name names.
It's very like the trying to expose who's a drugs cheat in sport. It's because they all deny until it's irrefutable, the proof, and then they'll grudgingly admit it was true and someone had spiked their toothpaste or something. And getting someone to be upfront about it is difficult, and they've got Vincent. They seem to have him backed into a corner where he is trying to avoid going to jail by being forthright, and he may bring down quite a lot of people with him.
It's not going to be a quick clean-up either, is it? They say that education's the key, educating the young people to how to avoid the mysterious people behind in dark alleys. But it's going to be more difficult than that, I suggest.
I don't think you'd ever clean it up. It's like drugs and sport again. I mean, you can get rid of some cheats, but do you ever get rid of the temptation and some other bad person trying to do something else to get ahead? Same with match fixing. I mean, there's always somebody who's susceptible in some way. So I don't know that you'd ever clean it up. I suppose all you can do is be ever more vigilant and put good systems in place.
When you think more and more of that of the cricket's being played in a part of the world where perhaps bookies are prevalent, let's say that.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I think in some countries it's not that bad to spot fix. I mean, it's just what they do in life. You know, they have a gambling culture, and corruption in some countries is different to corruption as we understand it in New Zealand. And what we think is a heinous crime, they just think is cute.
And some of the spots, I would never have given it a second thought, like what colour bat handle someone wears, or there are obscure things. They're not just no balling intentionally. Yeah,
I think the bat handle might be to let the punters know whether the fix is on, actually, the colour of the bat handle. But yeah, even like, will there be a no ball in the fourth over of the day? I mean, you can spot fix on anything at all, can't you? Will someone field on the onside in the second over? There's no end to it.
All right, let's move on to some positive sporting aspects. Situation with the rugby. Just enjoyed 2 wins for the Highlanders over the Hurricanes this year.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed that, yeah. Actually, I think the Highlanders have been very good this year. In fact, the New Zealand teams in the Super Rugby competition have been terrific. They could be 5 of the best 6 or 7 teams in the competition. Of course, they won't all make the semis because of the way the competition's structured, but there's been no weak New Zealand team this year.
A lot of pressure on Mark Hammett. Started to ease a little bit with those early performances. He might now be more under the microscope, but he's decided to perhaps step aside voluntarily.
Well, it shows you how fickle the media and the public is. I mean, I think the Hurricanes started off with 3 losses, if I recall, and there was massive calls all around Wellington. The Hammett needed to get sacked immediately, and if they can do it in the English Premier League, why can't we get rid of Hammett? He's hopeless. And then they had a really good run, and now he's a great coach, and they love him a lot. And then he announced he was leaving at the end of the season, and it's a tragedy. And now they've lost a couple again, and it's like, well, it's good that he's going. I mean, it's totally shallow.
And is Tauranga going to take over the sort of public wave of support for that? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's so.
I think he's going to the Blues, actually. I'm pretty sure he's going to the Blues, and good on him. I don't know that he's the answer anyhow. Who's to say? He's done a good job with counties, but that's not a super franchise.
It's just a very hard competition, and New Zealand teams beat each other up. No team is consistently performing. Even the Crusaders took a slow start to this comp.
Well, it's such an interesting year, interesting season. You couldn't really get 2 New Zealand teams run on the park and know who's going to win. And even home or away doesn't seem to matter hugely now either. So it's who's having a good spell, really. Chiefs look good, but there's nothing to say that the Hurricanes wouldn't beat them. It's very close.